In the movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, Chris Gardner had hit complete rock bottom. There was a scene where he was locked. He had found himself locked inside a subway station bathroom overnight because he had nowhere to sleep. He had been evicted from his apartment. He had his young son sleeping in his arms. There were tears coming down his face because someone was banging on the door trying to get in, unaware that there was this father just inches away trying to protect his child from this harsh reality. His life was literally crumbling around him. He was also struggling through an unpaid internship and facing relentless rejection everywhere he went. Yet, despite all of this chaos going on in his life, something powerful was happening inside. It was unfolding inside of him. So this wasn't a straightforward path to purpose. It wasn't guided by quick tips or catchy headlines. It was raw, it was messy, and it was deeply human. This is part 1 of 3, and in this episode, we're tackling that nagging feeling of being completely lost in life. And your life doesn't necessarily have to look like that, but you can still feel lost. You could still wake up with this feeling of, do I have purpose, a true purpose in my life? Hello, and welcome to Speaking of That. This is the podcast where we flip the mirror on pop culture headlines. I'm Isabella, your guide to the other side of the headlines. And if you're ready to peer into the reflection and uncover the hidden faces, follow me. Do you have those moments, days, or even weeks when you wake up and ask yourself, what am I even doing with my life? I feel like I'm just going through the motions every single day. Like my life is on autopilot. You wake up, maybe you go to the restroom, maybe you shower, get ready for your day, have coffee, tea, breakfast, go through your list of countless things you need to accomplish. You go to work, maybe you have time to exercise, and before you know it, it's dinner time. So it's time to eat dinner. It's time to get ready for bed. And then it's time to repeat the next day. Deep down, do you really feel you have a sense of purpose, or are you waiting for some magical aha moment to reveal what you're actually supposed to be doing? If you've been lacking a sense of purpose or direction lately, and trust me, you would not be alone. I've definitely been down that road, and I can tell you that there really is no easy way out. It's definitely not staying in your bed and hiding under the covers or at the bottom of some new series binge that you are recently watching. And recently, I came across an article by a guy named Farley Ledgerwood. And this article was titled, "I Was Lost and Had No True Sense of Purpose Until I Started Practicing These 7 Habits." Now, that title screamed my name because not only have I been down that road, but I had just finished watching this classical film called Citizen Kane. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please go check it out. In the classical film, we follow the life of Charles Foster Kane. He's a man who seemingly had everything: wealth, power, fame, influence. But when it was time for him to transition from this world, he whispered one final word, Rosebud, and it left everyone just confused. They sent a reporter out on a journey to uncover the meaning behind this mysterious last word, believing that it held the key to Kane's true purpose and happiness. And as the film unfolds, it becomes clear that despite all of his success in life, all of his fortune, his wealth, he had spent his life chasing something just elusive, something deeply meaningful, something his money couldn't buy him. And in the end, what we discover is that Rosebud was the name of the childhood sled he had played on before wealth and ambition had consumed his life and what he felt was his innocence. And the simple sled represents his lost purity, joy, and ultimately his true purpose. the happiness he sought but could never find or reclaim, because that was the happiness he felt with this sled. So no matter how grand his life became, he just couldn't find it. And it reminds us that headlines like the one that I'm going to talk about, promising quick paths to purpose, just might overlook the deeper truths hiding just beneath the surface. And when I read this headline promising 7 habits to find purpose, I was actually very excited, because after watching Cain's journey, I was thinking something might be missing, something vital from this story. And I was also thinking, just like Cain's secret sled, there may be something waiting quietly beneath the layers of noise to be discovered that could help us, so we didn't have to go through something like that through our whole life, right? We could use these 7 habits and we could find our purpose. And I wasn't even halfway through before I realized that Farley, he's the author, if you remember his story, it's definitely relatable. For a long time, he felt like he was just going through the motions every day, living on autopilot. Deep down, he had no real sense of purpose, and he kept waiting for some magical aha moment to reveal what he was meant to do. And that lightning bolt of clarity never came. The purpose for him just simply did not show up. So what did he do? What did Farley do? He discovered something important, that purpose isn't something that you magically find. It's something that you build day by day. And how do you build it? You build it through small, intentional habits that will shape your mindset and actions over time. And once he started practicing 7 specific habits, everything changed for him. He finally felt a sense of direction, like he wasn't just drifting aimlessly anymore, but he actually felt like he was moving forward towards something meaningful. But this got me thinking, what are those 7 habits and why do they work? And how did he magically find them? And how could the rest of us use them to feel a little less lost and a little more like we had our act together? So that's our game plan for today. We're going to unpack his 7 habits one by one, and we're going to dive into how each one contributes to that ever elusive sense of purpose. By the end of our chat today, you'll know these 7 habits and why psychologists and the other experts say they actually work, and what the image on the other side of the mirror is also looking like. And more importantly, I hope you'll feel inspired to try some of these yourself, because feeling lost without a purpose is really hard on your mental health, our mental health, and you don't deserve to stay stuck in that fog. So let's just go ahead and get started with habit number 1. Buckle up, because hopefully we go from lost to purposeful with these 7 habits. But the first habit is stop waiting for clarity and take action. And I had the question, but should you? But hey, let's get into it. Let's talk about something I used to believe with my whole entire heart, that I needed to have everything figured out before I started anything new. I thought I needed that perfect 3-year plan, fully mapped out, color coded. Maybe I needed to get it notarized before I could even take a single step forward. You want to guess where that got me? Yeah. Sitting on my couch, binge watching the latest whatever show I found for the umpteenth time, waiting for inspiration to strike like some kind of motivational lightning bolt. And it never came. Now, in psychology, what I was doing would be described as overthinking without action, which is called analysis paralysis. So when you get so caught up in trying to make the perfect decision, you end up making no decision at all. Now, the author of this article, Farley Ledgerwood, who inspired this episode, really went through something similar. He spent years waiting for some big cosmic aha moment that would reveal his life's purpose, maybe perhaps during a deep meditation or some soul searching session. And it never happened. Instead, what he found was that clarity actually comes from action, not the other way around. And in his words, he said that purpose isn't something that you just passively wait for. It's something that you're going to uncover through actually doing something. And that makes sense, right? The more you do, the more you try new things, the more you take small steps, explore different interests, the more pieces start to fall into place. It's like you're assembling a big puzzle, and you're not going to be able to see it until you snap all those puzzle pieces together. And he said in the article that he started taking small actions, reading about topics that interested him, starting tiny projects, reaching out to former mentors, and each step that he did helped him feel less stuck. And over time, the little actions that he took just were leading him towards some sense of direction. Psychology backs this up, but so does the opposite view. And hear me out on this one. The idea that clarity comes from action is backed up by behavioral psychology, because our brains are actually, they get feedback from us going out and actually living real world experiences, not from sitting on the couch going through overthinking mental loops. So if you're just sitting there and you're overthinking and running these scenarios in your head, you don't really have any real data that your brain can use. So if I were to give you an example of that, that would make sense. Let's say that you decided that you wanted to swim, but you were thinking, will you enjoy swimming? And you started theorizing about, well, will the water be too cold? Will it be too warm? Will I float? Will I not float? And at some point, you just got to jump in and splash around, right? And so Farley's really thinking that clarity comes from action, not thought. And that's great advice for some people. And here's where things get really interesting. While I personally love this idea of just starting, I've also discovered that not everyone thrives in the action first mindset. In fact, there are many experts, psychologists, and other experts who say that this whole concept of action, clarity comes from action, not thought, is just kind of a myth. And so now we're looking at this case of reflection on the other side of the mirror. Okay, well, some psychologists and behavioral scientists argue that when you take these random, unfocused actions before you gain any type of clarity, that's actually going to be counterproductive to you, and it's going to cause you to burn out. So in organizational psychology, for example, there's a lot of research that's done on this, and they are really emphasizing the importance of self-awareness before action to help you understand their take a little bit better. So what that means is if you don't know what you truly want, you might just be wasting time, years perhaps, running in the wrong direction because you're taking these impulsive actions, and it's actually leading to more frustration because you're not aligning your actions with your core values because you didn't have clarity first, okay? And then there's another author, Cal Newport. He is the author of Deep Work, and I'm going to reference him a few times in this episode today. But he calls this the busy trap. And he says that, people who constantly are taking action and they don't have any clear direction, they're just getting stuck in cycles of what he calls shallow work. So shallow work means that you are always busy, but you're never making any meaningful progress. And there's actual brain science to kind of back this up. So research on decision fatigue is suggesting that making constant impulsive decisions without clarity can lead to exhaustion and then worse decision making over time. And This is research that a lot of this research is done by a psychologist called Roy Baumeister. If you want to look that up for your own purposes. So here's the thing. So what's the right approach? This is where I think we need a middle ground. And to be clear, there's tons of other experts and research out there. We just don't have the time to cover all that on this particular episode. But I'm giving you the really big players in, looking at this headline from both sides. But I do think we need a middle ground, because if you're someone who tends to overthink, if you're waiting for perfect clarity, that could be holding you back. And I think we can all understand that, research or no research. But if you're someone who jumps into things too quickly and you act without any reflection, it might send you in the wrong direction. Okay, so what would be a better approach? There's this thing called the reflection action cycle. First, engage in guided reflection. You're going to want to ask yourself, what excites me? What drains my energy? What do I value most? And then don't just answer those in your head. Actually write them down. Either you can journal regularly or just write them down. Maybe do a voice memo, or maybe you just want to chat with a friend about it. Okay. Once you have the answers to those questions, you're going to take some small, low risk actions. So let's say that let me give you an example. Let's say you've decided that your job does not fulfill you and all it does is bring stress. And you've decided to quit your job, move to Bali and become a surf instructor. And that's tempting, even though I don't know how to surf. But let's just say we're going to use this example. So instead of quitting your job and moving to Bali to become a surf instructor, maybe you just take a short trip first, or try teaching, while you're there, maybe try teaching people how to surf. Treat it like an experiment, not a lifelong commitment. And then after your trip, reflect on the outcome or whatever it is you decided to do, right? Did the action give you more clarity, or did it give you more stress? So did going to Bali give you clarity, or did it make you feel stressful? If it gave you clarity, take another step in that direction. If not, you're going to need to change your approach, tweak it, and try again. If we apply this idea to movies, for example, think about Frodo Baggins. Okay. He didn't wait for Gandalf to hand him a step-by-step Mordor travel itinerary. He took the first step out of the Shire. But if we contrast that with Batman, Bruce Wayne didn't wake up one day and throw on the bat suit. He spent years of training, reflecting, and preparing before he took action. His clarity came from deep self-exploration first. So what's the takeaway then? Both approaches have their place. It depends on who you are. So should you take action or wait for clarity? Again, it depends on who you are. So if you tend to overthink and you tend to analyze everything to nauseam, you probably need to take more action and stop waiting for clarity. That is the only way you're going to know if something works for you. You have to try it. You have to get out of your head and you have to try it. But if you're a person that tends to jump into everything impulsively without thinking, maybe you need to slow down, reflect a little bit more, take a few little tiny random actions, think about them first. Don't necessarily make them so random, because taking random action without a clear goal might feel productive, but it could actually be keeping you from real progress. And for most people, really, it's just about balance. Okay. It's about balance, taking a step, reflecting, adjusting as need. So at the end of the day, clarity is rarely a lightning bolt moment. it usually is something that you build one decision at a time or one action at a time. So if you're feeling stuck, ask yourself, what's one small, low risk action that I can actually take today? And it doesn't have to be huge to be impactful. Just something. Start where you are with what you have, because even if you don't have all the answers yet, one step forward is always better than just standing still and having no step forward. And that would lead us into habit 2. Embrace failure instead of fearing it. I'm wondering, should you always? But let's get into it. It sounds a little bit painful to me, right? Embrace failure instead of fearing it. I mean, think about it. Who do you know that's like, yes, I want to fail? Most of us go out of our way to avoid failure like our life depends on it. But if habit 1 was about taking action, habit 2 is about what we do when some of those actions inevitably go wrong. And trust me, they will. And that is perfectly okay. Now, Farley talks about this in his story in the article I read. He said that he used to be so afraid of failing that it would paralyze him. If he wasn't 100% sure that he'd succeed, he wouldn't even try it. And when he did try and things didn't work out, he would take it personally as proof, first of all, that he shouldn't have even tried and that he wasn't good enough, rather than what it truly was, which is an opportunity to learn and course correct. And I can relate to this. I've procrastinated a lot. Procrastination was a big problem for me in a big, huge chunk of my life. I would procrastinate on ideas or avoid opportunities because I didn't want to look foolish or, fail publicly. It's like I'd rather sit in comfortable stagnation than risk the sting of failure. And I can think about one prime example, which would be starting this podcast. And when I left my career to do something different, I would think about, former colleagues seeing me. Oh my goodness, she's doing this YouTube thing, et cetera, because there's also the risk of being judged and failing. But here's the thing. Failure isn't the end of the road. It actually is redirection. And Farley was talking about this in his article, and he said that he learned this firsthand because he had applied for his dream job and he spent weeks preparing. He nailed multiple interviews. So they were calling him back for multiple interviews. And then guess what? He didn't get it. It feels brutal. And at first he was crushed, but instead of letting that failure confirm all of his worst fears about himself, he decided to analyze what went wrong. So what he did, and remember when I said he reached out to his mentors? Well, they helped him through this. So what he did is he worked on his weaknesses. He kept applying elsewhere. And then a few months later, guess what happened? He landed an even better job. This job that he got aligned with him way better than the one that he actually wanted and didn't get. And if he had gotten his first choice, he would have missed out on the better fit. So that experience taught him that failure is not rejection. It's just a form of redirection. And you can think of it like this. Most of us have a GPS, or we used a GPS, and we know when your GPS is recalculating. For example, took a wrong turn, rerouting, hit a dead end, recalculating. No idea where you're going, keep moving and the GPS will adjust. Every failure is a signpost saying, not this way, but try another route. Psychology says failure is a good thing. Mostly. Okay. Well, what does the mostly mean? Well, let's get to this, but let's start with science backs this up. There is a Stanford psychologist, Carol Dweck, who is famous for studying this particular phenomena with what she calls the growth mindset. Now, basically, growth mindset is believing that intelligence and abilities that you have, they're not fixed. You're not just born with them, so they're not innate, but you develop them through your own effort and your experiences. And people who have this growth mindset actually see failure as feedback. They use it to improve. They use it to keep going. They use it to ultimately succeed and reach their goals. Meanwhile, you have other people who have a fixed mindset. Now, what is a fixed mindset? Just exactly how it sounds. These people believe that talent is just innate. You're born with it. You can't develop it. And they tend to give up after they fail at something because they just look at this as proof that they're just not good enough or they shouldn't be doing that particular thing. Now, her research also demonstrated that students, it's very fascinating because I also, when I was teaching, would see this in my students as well, particular students, but students who viewed a bad grade as a challenge to improve would actually outperform students who took failure as a sign that they just weren't smart. And it's not just students, but it's an absolute fascinating phenomenon. But we also know that business owners, entrepreneurs who experience failure as statistically more likely to succeed in their next venture. So what I'm saying is that if you have a business owner who sees failure as an opportunity to improve, then they're more likely to succeed in their next venture. And if you take a look at Harvard Business Review, and it has a lot of interesting information in there, but there was a statistic that I want to share with you in regards to this, directly related to it. There is about 60% of successful entrepreneurs who have failed in previous businesses before their breakthrough. That is a huge, huge, huge number. Why? Well, because failure teaches you things success can't. And they had a growth mindset. It builds resilience. It shows you what you need to work on and forces creative problem solving. And as weird as it sounds, failure isn't the problem in the process. It's actually a feature, an upgrade feature, if you will. But then that leaves us with a question. If we're saying that failure is eventually going to make us so successful, should we always fail forward? That's the question I had. And now before we all start chanting, fail, 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 yeah, because we can be successful, like we're at some motivational rally. But let's just hit the brakes for a second, because I do want to talk about this from the entire picture, because not all failure is created equal. And I think that's the important thing to remember. And you've got a lot of experts that are saying if you blindly fail forward, it's just not the best strategy. Because sometimes failure isn't a good thing, because I was talking about it like it was. So just stay with me here. Yes, failure can be a powerful teacher. We know that. But we also know that we shouldn't glorify failure too much. And remember me talking about Cal Newport? He's the author of Deep Work. In fact, what he suggests is that not all failure leads to progress. So if you keep failing, and I think this is the key, if you keep failing in the same way, but you're not learning, you're not adjusting, then you're not growing. You're just wasting your time. Okay. So failure without reflection then would be pointless. If you don't stop to analyze why something that you tried to do, you failed at, you're just setting yourself up for more failure, because you're going to keep doing the same thing. Okay. Now, our brains actually this is very interesting. And I'm actually excited to share this with you because it's fascinating to me that our brains actually hate failure so much that we sometimes will rationalize away bad choices rather than learn from them. So, what would this look like in the example that I gave you about the dream job? So, if you applied for your dream job and you did all the work and you went through all these interviews, but at the end of the day, you didn't get it, instead of stepping back and critically assessing what went wrong, you're going to make excuses instead of improvements. Those excuses could be, well, you know what? They just didn't see they had a good thing. I didn't like that interviewer. They didn't like me because I wore green. I'm using something really silly, but you get the point. Additionally, there is this little thing called decision fatigue. And decision fatigue research says that when you have too much failure without wins, it's actually weakening your motivation. So that's what it means. People actually do need small victories to stay motivated. But if you fail over and over without seeing progress, it can be discouraging, not inspiring. So they're saying, yes, not all failure is a good thing, especially if you're failing over and over again, which probably means that you're not analyzing and looking at what went wrong. So that would lead us then to this question. What's the right way to fail forward then? There's so many opinions here. I think the key is not just failing, but failing well, if that makes sense. Here's how you would do it. Analyze what went wrong. Don't just say, oh, well, I failed. Actually ask yourself, why did this happen? What can I change? What can I improve for the next time? And try not to make the same mistake twice. I know sometimes we do. Guilty, but try not to make the same mistake twice. So I guess you could call that smart failure. Means new mistakes, not the same old ones. So if you're failing in the same way over and over, something needs to be adjusted. But if you adjust something and you fail, then that's kind of like a new failure. So because we're going to make mistakes. That's okay. You just need to reframe it as data, not defeat. So in research, I conducted research for most of my career. And when an experiment failed, I just didn't throw away the data. I adjusted the variables and I tried again. And let me tell you something. Some of the best research comes from those experiments that failed because I learned so much. And then you just apply that logic to your own life and you celebrate the small wins. Avoid constant failure without reward. You celebrate your small wins, any minor progress to keep your momentum going forward. Okay. And here is a shocking thing for some people, but not all. Listen, even the most successful people have failed. The greats have failed. Failure is so common that most successful people have done it and they've had to push through it. Like Michael Jordan, for example, he missed 9,000 shots, lost nearly 300 games and became a legend. Thomas Edison, he failed 10,000 times just to invent the light bulb. And his response, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Okay. There's been countless best-selling authors who wrote books that were rejected until finally they were accepted and they became best-selling authors. I think Mr. Beast, well-known YouTube guru, I think he made 400 and some odd videos before he even went viral. So honestly, I mean, I failed a lot too. There's tons of ways in which I failed. The first time I started this journey here on podcast, Crickets, not even one view except my own view. And I had to go back and look. I mean, it was my first time. I'm doing things different. And with each one that I do, I'll get better and better because each failure is teaching me something. It is teaching me something. So failure is only useful if you learn from it. I think that's the main takeaway. If you're failing strategically and you're analyzing, you're adjusting, and you're trying again, it's like an upgrade. And this is the perfect place to end part 1. Don't forget to tune in to part 2 and 3. And if this episode resonated with you, if you saw yourself in this story, I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, share this with someone who you know might need it. It's free and it helps the channel and other people find me. And most importantly, give yourself permission to be a work in progress. You don't have to have it all figured out yet. You just have to start somewhere. See you next time.